the Bindu choosing Sunday, the Hindi na you the Shuguti Jugjan the Domido.
So, His Holiness is asking in the Hindi translation if at the end of the praise to the 17 Nalanda masters, if there is the colophon to it or not. In Hindi. If there is, please look at it.
Hindi bidu ka ale
so it's not there in Hindi.
So 대샴대 한다. 저 비도에 비도다 비디. 비디도. 루지데 비도가. 이 힘들왜? 힘들왜? 저도 죽장 슈구중니 비 슈구중니 자, 대샴대한테 지동아 딩듀 점링 캔들 천리당 추지 뭐고 yar게 차도 친데 대난 돈진 남이 추지금들 라르 산제지 진주 원남 산제지 추주를 신의 대바 토바시 거가 신도 체스 다 수르스 가서 가면 좋은 봐 로수르 네베 타네 아니 태솜과레스 질 태솜을야 너무쟁이 태솜다 아니 너무쟁이 입에 태솜다 셰토고 봐 자들이 이르자네 그 태종 질 태종 사야지 그 가서 우리 그게 방지 입을 지야도 재미도 봐 자들이 이르자네 간다다 태종지 권에 남사 지금 그게 이지션 draw 모임 봐 그게 당시에 근데 이나 선배 태종 거래 있어 로수르네 시제ቷ네 태종지 권에 심을 따신 제대 있어 교전 초하다. 교전 통에 시르기 초하다 제베 대바자와라 용자이니 견주촌이다. 엔디간에 사지전도 바고 저절로 소베서 이슝 디디 표도 심바. 슝표도 심바디다 매매론도 통에 견주촌이 유고당 지정 안에 유매토 서계지 라마 러규 셴 군난데 날랜데 변을 줄인지 지고 사신던들 개배제조 대단한 닝네 그외 선데 진저신 진주 중하다.
So in the colophon, His Holiness has written the colophon to the praise of the 17 Nalanda masters. His Holiness has written, today in an age when science and technology have reached a most advanced stage, we are incessantly preoccupied with mundane concerns. In such an age, it is crucial that we follow the Buddha. That we who follow the Buddha acquire faith in his teaching on the basis of genuine understanding, and it is with an objective mind endowed with a curious skepticism that we should engage in careful analysis of the teachings and seek the reasons. And then, on the basis of seeing the reasons, we engender a faith that is accompanied by wisdom. For this, the excellent treatises on the profound and the vast aspects of the path by the great masters, such as the well-known 6 ornaments and 2 supreme masters, as well as the Buddha Palita, Vimuktisena, and so on, remain indispensable. And so, here, with regards to the study of the Dharma, as I said yesterday, it is very important to have an unbiased, impartial state of mind. And here in the text, it's mentioned to have an objective mind endowed with a curious skepticism. And so what we need is an unbiased mind, and we should always we should not think that doubting something is not necessarily bad, because without any curious skepticism, you will not be able to do any an examination of the teachings. So it is important, in order to do examination analysis into the teaching of the Buddha, to have this kind of curious skepticism. A healthy kind of doubt is necessary. So the text in the colophon even goes on to say, even in the past there was a tradition of having paintings of the 6 ornaments and 2 supreme masters made on Thangka scrolls.
This one. So they and this one. 대단 점리 인줄 개배표 모절 렉션 중에 처음으로 미지 당에 이 서답에 덕규 민지 조어 진지로선 다규 민지 조어사디 조출도 남지 싫어고 타네 아니 지 대단 달라 군제 통에 거네 아니 미치베 당에 대봐 저서 따지던 거는 담바리 삼베페디 니고 리베딩네다 그게 지금 매버도 뛰는 전에 타면 대봐. 다 뒤타네 아니 다 틀려 세시도 다 숙산배 이식이 대봐. 다 뒤타네 아니 림백이 다 대배 싫어고 저도 제배 대배 시천이 아니 림백이 먼저 줄게 하지. 다 틀려야 아니 다 먼저 줄 겨러잖아 삼배 아니 먼저기 대봐. 죄송아. 저상하다. 더유 민징 세야되기 균전통에 관해 대바지하지 매바지하지 저와스럽도 다 당연 대배 군을란데 아니 냠린체니 다 림베 시기 더 최상 또고 제대로 동야지 죄송아
So in the praise to the 17 Nalanda masters on verse number 19, His Holiness has said, having thus praised these most learned ornaments of the world, the excellent sources of wondrous and insightful teachings, may I, with a mind unwavering and pure, be blessed so that my mind becomes ripened and free. And so here, with regard to the mind becoming ripened, what you need is to have a strong, unwavering kind of conviction in the teachings based on reason and logic, not just blind faith. And when you have that kind of conviction, then you will have what is known as an admiring faith. And on the basis of that, then you will have a strong conviction in the teaching of the Buddha, also the faith where you trust the teaching and the rituals and so forth. And then from there, what you develop is, with that what you develop is to aspire to reach the same kind of goal that they have reached, the Buddha and so forth. So in order to have this kind of a strong, heartfelt sort of conviction in the teaching of the Buddha, you need to have reason and then develop faith based on that. These 3 types of faith, the admiring faith and the trusting or conviction, and then the aspiring faith, where you want to reach the same goal. And so ripening here refers to developing these kind of faiths and then progressing along the path and becoming free in the end.
Yeah. 가서 발리면 누가 이게 발리 가져오세요. 가서 집에서 잡으셨어. 다시 들어가도 발리도 So that Pali da ya nasa Pali so namsa nga maso a. Ada nga Charlie any chamje dan any Pali so.
So we'll get tea. Yesterday you didn't have bread but tea, and today you have bread but don't eat the bread right away. We'll have tea and bread together, and then we'll say the grace for tea and bread, and then take them.
That day at the Shubudigi. Di Shubudalina. She needs to Ding Tuan She Bess. Ding She called Judo Chishing. Samuel Chambe gives some Tabadan, Talam South for Chingilos. That the you mentioned that can just show us Lavina. Tangala Children Namjik Shirobi. That Didu Yinzu Kandimba. That is student review Namsha. The student review. That dangerous at the Jedi Samuchi down. That Jalaya, that Yidi, Kunzove, that Nesugan Shedi. That was truly lodi. Something they to make our Mishibi Sumua. Re, now some of the Tungem do the other study. Any Tungem do was Ingilia, Tungi to serve Marvada. That is Mishiba want to you, but the savage. Just as I said, they don't make out the Mishiba and Sungshika. Then you are doing the Tango or Maribas as Sungche. That Mishiba that to make you was Sungdoa. That's as a Mishiba the Sajudama. That Mishiba the Sajudama is an Tanto de Masadi, Darley Gudua. Nang Susan Maimba, correct. Yilugi, Duludi, Sajudan. That Mariba Momo Cascation is Momo Yevana. That Mariba, our Karakari Badidi, Kada Mariba Susane, or Kasuri Big Mishiba. Harvard to Yada, Chigi, Kasuri Big Triven, young True Chadigoro. So that would true to show. So today isn't it another Basadi Shehu. That the day in Tandam Basadi, the Chingo Jutan, South Marwa. She is a shadow. So today she needs to Deni turn dog shings, Deni turn shaves, Deni Namsha She in the Zane, any castle of Nashiri, Denshi Namshalia, Koa, any Layudua. Denshi Jir in it, Kasur Pali, the Sanskrit, the Saman of Sunguyari. Uneta Denshi, Dresha, shifted the because on the people to my Shayabayina, the Cholang, the Chedag. That's all Chedag Shungi, the Shivuji Savay on the door. So the lady Sane, Denshi called you to Chishin. The Neji Denshi, Dodan Yao Shade Sane, and the Churkin Josachi do somebody roll shadow. The Dungan Teve, any Chawa, Gordon, take Mercer Deng, Lamden, that the Churkin Josiari. So the lady made the Sane, and it's sent. Churkunjo, the little Churkunjo, never told you to Zane, that Churkunjo de two Julia Deng, Kansa de, and Pakbek induced Jenny. Or that Ginduted. Didn't any Lobe Gindun de Todum to get Bangdog in Yamni Cheddar, and Tar Bangdog, Tar Chimpe Negolia, and Sanja Pakwas Chen. Or that in the Indu, Samuel Chambe, give some Tabat. Tabat, that was child, Shen Tabe, that Tabaji, you do Zane. And Talam Zao Chu Yungyare, Talam Zao Chu Shingiloso. Honinga, Chamjutanga. Sanje and Sami, Joji and Sami, Public and Sami, Jola, number of members, Sami, Joe, number of
So next on verse number 20, it says, by understanding the two truths, the way things exist, I will ascertain how through the four truths we enter and exit samsara. I will make firm the faith in the three jewels that is born of valid reason. May I be blessed so that the root of the liberating path is firmly established within me. And so with regard to this verse, what it is saying is how we should go about with ripening and freeing ourselves. And so here what we need is this critical analytical faculty with which we check what the reality of things is. And so we have to think about the causal reality of dependent origination in terms of the causal reality, which is, of course, talking about the conventional nature of things, how things function conventionally. But then what happens in our life is we have this deluded mind, which actually, because of which we cause ourselves lots of suffering. Although we don't want suffering, we want to avoid suffering and want to have happiness, but then we cause ourselves sufferings. And why it is so is because we are ignorant about the true nature of things, how things exist. And therefore, the Buddha has said that although things do not exist the way we perceive them, the way they appear to us, we cling on to the appearance, the appearance, and then because of that ignorance about the true reality of things, we cause the karma and then suffering and so forth. Therefore, it is necessary to check into how this ignorance sees things and events and phenomena. And so what you'll find is that things do not exist the way the ignorance which hangs on to this true existence. So the things do not exist in that way. And therefore, when you check into the reality of things, what you'll find is that they are devoid of any intrinsic or absolute existence. And therefore, that absence of absolute or intrinsic existence is called ultimate reality. So that's how things really are, that they do not have any independent or absolute existence at all. And that is what is referred by the true truth and the true truths, conventional and ultimate, the way things are. And therefore, by finding that called conviction in the true truths, then what you can do is you will be creating the causes for understanding the true four truths, the four noble truths, and in this, through that firm faith in the four truths, then you will enter, and you will understand how we enter into samsara and exit from it. And therefore, it says through understanding the true truths and the four noble truths, by understanding how we cause ourselves to enter into samsara and exit samsara, and then as I say here, I will make firm the faith in the three jewels. You'll be able to have this firm faith in the three jewels that is born of valid reason. So how that happens is that you find that because this ignorance causes the suffering and so forth, and because this ignorance can be put an end to by understanding the ultimate reality of things, and therefore you will attain cessation, the true cessation, which is that the negation or elimination of the negative emotions from our mind. And that is one aspect of the true Dharma jewel, and the other aspect of the true Dharma is the true path that leads to that cessation. And when you understand the Dharma in that way, and then you will understand that the person who actually embodies the true cessation and path is the true Sangha. And then in this way you will also be able to ascertain about how one becomes enlightened by going along the path, and therefore one will have a firm faith in the three jewels born of reason. And therefore you say, may I have, and then you say, may I be blessed so that the root of the liberating path is firmly established within me. So once you have this firm faith in the three jewels through this kind of logic, then you will implant this liberating path firmly within yourself.
다디 수데 두근 예시 타바되니 민중 로당 제니 다 den시 남샤 다 den이 그 框呢 애니 den시 남샤들이 야오 저게 시행이 용도잖아요 다 나라주 민들베 동에서야디 gyudu gyenu dene chungwa chi shi. Da di gyudi chinjilo lo yinba, semgu zhengxin lo mo shugu chi tong yundu zane, da dunga dan da chai tuya chi yongsa re samba chigi, ane taba tuñi lo le yingu duwa. Chai sui da dunga shiwa zamba yinba, kanda dunga gyu sao kone meba soya chigi, da yong sibu chi tong yundu zane, da ngone chane taba tong na samba chigi lo chi ligru. Da melon jede taba toba shiwa saya keshi di meba. 상당 직sem나로 소다 차인도 전에 네버 띵네 드로잉도 전에 왔다 타바 주퇴하지 레샤 다치 주사바시 등에 민도가 여여로다 서진이 인도 전에 다 타바 되니 걸로 내용 거봐 두근이시 타바 되니에 민중로다 민중로지 다 랑된리야 동의기 너주 삼니 대다 체지 동의기 교 봉루이 버지 통인도 전에 시보 코버 심진 현디에 다 능수 지고로 다 들이 통용도 다 강자 다 동네 봉투야지도 레디 다 동네기 줄로 당도랑제 동네기 좀 미시방 강다 동네기 좀 당도랑 저대야지 통용도 전에 아니 지금 미시별로지 레고다 저진의 인도 저는 좀 되게 총대 두고 닝지 자와전스네 초도 타 초려야 타야만 봐 다 초시스 나가 있는 탐에 붙여봤다. 저들이 인도전에 초기 태도 와서 총대 두고 닝지당 선이 이 가서 렌지천한테 송여는 고불로 렌지천 총대 두고 닝지. 그래서 초 탑에 인도전에 다 그것도 와. 그래서 어디 총대 두고 닝지 자원전 들리기다 닝지기야 지다 닝지 대야 동네에 차나 삼바. 지 동네에 차는데 그 삼바서 뭐인 봐. 그러다 동네에 자원돼 봐. 사고 보사고라 가라다 잘라 될 동에 자와 좋아 동에 잔을 사와서 동에 잔들로 양의 동에를 좀 들고 되게 된 닝지 직계 용이 다 대장배 아니 장주선 주민 장수 정보 신기로 오신 어디지 다 대수대 신대 신비 중도 전화로 퇴송 공배 8월 신바다 도시 대배 섬내 넘군라 네바 델리 네바 진지로 네바 달라 네바 진지로 사다 되게 어떤 게 शुरू
So in verse number 21, it says, "May I be blessed to perfect the training of renunciation and aspiration for liberation, the total pacification of suffering and its origin, as well as in an uncontrite awakening mind that is rooted in an infinite compassion that wishes to protect all sentient beings." And so with regard to this, now through understanding or through the understanding of the true truths, one understands the Four Noble Truths. When one understands the Four Noble Truths through that, then one will see that the unwanted suffering that happens to us is because of our distorted state of mind, which is not able to see the reality as it is, but differently. And therefore, when that is seen, one will be able to see that this distorted mind or ignorance is something which can, it is possible to put an end, to end this course of suffering and attain and liberation or nirvana. And so when you have this firm conviction that is about this possibility for nirvana, then you will of course naturally want to attain that nirvana. So you will have this aspiration for nirvana for oneself. Now, having understood that it is possible for one's nirvana, it is possible for oneself to attain nirvana and by ending suffering, and to end suffering. And then when you look at other sentient beings, you'll see that they are also in the same kind of condition that you are, that they also are causing themselves more suffering by creating the more causes for suffering through ignorance, and therefore you will have this strong compassion towards the sentient beings, with wishing them also to be out of suffering and not only thinking of nirvana for yourself alone. And therefore, I have in the text it says an inspiration for liberation, the total pacification of suffering and its origin, as well as an uncontrived awakening mind that is rooted in an infinite compassion. that it wishes to protect all sentient beings. And so, with regard to compassion, which causes us to have the bodhicitta, the bodhicitta, which is the compassion, which is the root of bodhicitta. The compassion here is referred to as the infinite compassion. So here the term infinite compassion actually is borrowed from Nagarjuna's Ratnavali as well, where he refers to this kind of compassion. And so when you have compassion towards other sentient beings, not just wishing them out of suffering, but actually wanting to act and actually do resolve yourself to help these sentient beings to go out of suffering, then you have this kind of infinite compassion towards them, which causes you to have bodhicitta. In
도지 대배 섬내 남군라 내가 달라니 버 신지 나오시네. 다 바로도 신배 남지체. 다 전에 도지 대배 섬내 시네. 다 도지 대배디 안도 루루로 소버디 이디기 다 도지 대배 슝자야라라. 아니 도지 대배 지금 담아 먹고지 아주 남기 영자 아니 주진 겨주스는 송대하다 디나네 용기하래. 다 베나 사라하 라소베 제샤베 토하 주버디든사 다 주제지 자와쳐도 와. 엔데네마 챤니 좀전에 랑기에다 규디멍구지다 규디는 멍구지다 송야래.这句的写句了说我的蒙古就当这样的。到底的可是学问能行，杨扎现在送去人民都，파르도 신비兄弟杨扎现在送去民族战呢，到底特别晓得太强呢，到底对这边切다来的，真正用些个다 나와了呀，아니 거기 좀 된데 경롱 남전 전이 송샤야, 거기야 지금 착제가 나봐도 봐 돈이, 다디 박발해야 돼 주주 나리 요래, 매발라 착제지 줘봐. 야채월로 매발라 사도 바로도 심해 줘봐. 선물로 하벌 매발라 착신지 줘봤으니 줘봐 숨쉬니 아연대회 송도가 주주나리야. 전에 와다 좀 된데 얘기 상황의 최에 지 변의 최주 규진 가시 결론과 남자 다가도는 송셔버든데 여버리. 다지네 상황 최 폐쇄디디 아니经过大规那巴里呀下面但是等别经过3年다 주고 서로 가서 왔다 간다면 뒤에 내다 지금 뭐라 아니 디지셔 때는 대비经过那巴了 랑강하게 샷해야지 용구로 받아 가르스라는 수구서야 돼 현존을 봐 현존 수구서도 봐 자상가 뒤에 강을 여섯 될라 대 명어도 사바지고 수고 매밀 흔들고 샤를 용기하래 마도 뒤에 예민을 마도베经过 하소도 제 뭐저게 사바 세저게 사발에 도와주려 요하래서 아들 말와 와야 그 간다 뒤에 강도 여정에 될래야 코르벽에 규민이 옆에 그돌이야 랑강 안게 샤돼야지 저들이 뭐 인도산에 어다 뒤에 뒤 지금 규민이 그게 가서 그게 깬데도 주변 내걸래 아니 랑강 안게 땡다 때문에经过 나발이야 샤되면시 자 드르게 통하네 아니 규지지 마소 되게다 뒤에 조 셔도셔 뒤에 뒤니 아니 지금 내저 될 때네 아니 사람 거 또 뉴도 줘야지 자 독선다 샤르지 임버리 아니 림베기다 가서 그렇겠다 당글다 로변 디기 다经过 당분 가서 때는 때문에经过 무슨 샤니 되네마 톱에 담바데 고랑기 냠셴나 아니 고랑게다 로마 리숭리숭로만 나셔지 나 도선 저되기도 와 상황 초어되리 자 근데 인도산에 다가 나와서 샤데버시면 인도산에 점된데 냥엔레 대베 제리네 고 용쇼를 봐. 딱 가서 쉬어야 돼. 롱주소베 구세네. 점된데 초고 주체. 아니 롱주소베 구사지. 다 야, 가서다 구신남샤타는 용되기도 와. 자, 근데 이번 인도산에 간다 초고 주고 주gen기 주시 롱주소베 구이. 에는 양치 긍두기 수그르바 나서 고 시그르다. 자, 근데 이번 인도산에 점된데 냥안에 대해서 제리네 고 셰스 차지. 다 딩가 루주샤요. 나도 뭐시버시기 지제가 어느지 그럼 뭐라다 님십치기 하래. 제나도 디 아주 무식 싱그와 은라데요. 뭐라 님십체님. 다 발리기 슝도 제제. 에도 가서 수 두르체 두세니 님십치기 하다. 대표시 타용 거래. 세상하다 콩기스도 타일랜드 아니 개론 왜야 또 두고 패셔 지리야 니만지 다가 나올이야 여샤지도 코로 자좀 먹고는 여대버지 다 가서 우리 벽에 나와 샷 들이 총도가 세상에는 콩기 랑게 둠들 나리야는 하면 안 된 것도 제가 제리야 다 때문에 지르고 균체를 지기 다 된대기 düzü지 뭐 여러데 다 코로나한테 심어서 양용 추모 인도산에 아니 점된데기 가서 꾸티 이식 꾸지 다다 있네 제도 없어 무슨 총샤 저는 공격기 루지 가나리아 아니 타간지 나리아 폐체 아니 제네시가 타간지르샤 대두스 크랑 면으로 저도 그돌이야 얘네만 꾸티 빠날 세면도 신 얘네만 꾸네만 왜 가보지마 중니 결론도스마 가서 우리 면람 좀 주시버디 유가나마 파되지 때 빠르게셔 내 빠르도 통죠 저 들어도 와 다들 저 미스터리어다 이 맞춰야지 어떡하래 대비나 딱고 지금 내셔 먹고 되버이나 다들 용서해 주거다 저한테 인도산에 상하고 저거도 제다 주지 아등에 강셔야 돼 규디라는 지역체 다들 마찬가지네 애니 주진 소소 멍구지다 그러 덤베 토메 덤베 다보고 차대야래 다 개고 인도부터 차샤나 사운드에 토메만 다 규마 미줄루 성도 미줄루 용세다 시르고도 차대야래 다 주지 멍구지 직다 대다게 직 가서다 라모 고모서 전장체니 간다 주진도 제게 다 숭멍구지 아니 다 계속 남샤 멍구 쉬우셔야 규디시 다 간다 긴고 남샤 먹을 타는 거 여봤다. 아니 사고도 라메고 먹을 타는 거 여봐. 다 라메기 냠니 또고 템부 상을 내니 냠려나 주제다 다 도와서 주제. 도와서 루. 다 주어디든 샤샤나. 와다 주제리 뭐냐지다 상하기 사상하게 남기 로 차라체인 거 봐. 이루도 차라체니. 이루 차라체니 다 이루 참여간에 다 냠니치하지 다 저어디 쓴 다 상하 살매거니네 그지고 차게 첨부 다가는 신기 사제 아니 규승기 다가다 지금 사동 송주 배 과터두디 회사강 송기야래 차게 첨부 터두디 회사강 송기야래 조바 첨부에 책주 터두디 회사강 송기야래 사운드에 아니 배등교 회사 다 조른 게 배등교 회사들이 뉴물 해지지 회사 간에 다 손고요. 그래서 이번 인도산에 다 딘데기다 또고 지금 뉴도 깨야다 다 딘데기 또고 냠용도 제외선에 숨셔지 차대기도 와. 제가 드즈나리아 지금 다외 거도 저 개우게요 말. 또 다시 유전 현실 개별로 뒤에야 쫀득난 가다 동리가 따와 딘제기 난저버디 동리가 따와 웃음 거는 그 동리가 따와 여봐 가서 여 시샤chen 다 송셔 차도 쳐서 되지 가다 동리가 따와 여대 버지 차도 다 딘제 인도 안더디 도저 테베 섬네 람꾼라 사디 신 나무 조지 별로 배배 거두리야 아니 지금 도즈면 냠니 징이지 에는 상하사야지 지금 님부야 말했어 소리지 상하 냠니 징이지 도리야 님부야 말했어 상하 캐치는 도 자지스 뇌 냠니를 캐치는 상하 자지스 다 간다지 바지 너도 나스를 뒤에 재미 텐션을 통되는데 정도가 그래서 진짜 인도하다 신들신부 슝디的嘛讲三界的去几怎么过以后就落了夏威夷呢他地那地的都什么空气定用的상하 도시 대배 겁네 성숨 로지고 지기다 송대야 지기 시 구숨 하려야 돼. 시 구숨 사야기 남샤지 송셔버 디타네 인 사무스당인데 대 좋아서 가야 돼. 다 데도 된데래샤 사무지 시에는 다 대화해야지 다 내번해야지 영화도 자 되는 인도산에 도지 대배 섬네 남군라 네바달라니 버 신주로스 루지지가 아메리카리아 지금 최소 지금 아주 지금 처하체 내 전집식이야래 근데 신도아지야 나디 최소디 아니 진다 되면로 아자라지 그 나디사 아니 벽 추기디 배나는절 투버스라 이나 디도스 카셰 마데 지기도사 아니 거주도 님의 흉도 제 아니 카셰니 나는절 투요 말이스 이르시기도 그런데 게 뭐로 다디 마시베게 저래 아들이 시험하고 넣으신기 배나 님의 저거 차샤는 로드무치 다 조차되어래 별 강제 좀 로드무치 아니 포유 정신 남게 로드무치 기겐리 다 지단 쉬이나 아니 루주도 나리야래 순구진진 아니 로드무치니 도시용이야래 배만 순구 타서 쿵도스디 고불루레우도 다 되도 된다게 강다영이 강다면 저거 신부미 책식을 남냠니 제인도잖아요. 아니 가다 아니 현주 아니现在다 가다 현주이기 때문에 뭐 가다 정신 현주가 아니라 상당고도잖아요. 가다 같은 지심을 쉐버리야 가다 동력이 나와지리 쉐고도 당연히 자기심을 쉐버리나 다 시착진 남지 착진선 쉐인도잖아요. 간다 내루 대코는 지지 말라고 마시나 가고 싶어요. 세상에 저거 좀 냠니 지금 뭐 가서디 다 저 로지음식 다 토용고요. 러버음식 토용고요. 아래 봐 별로 뭐냐 전에 봐 사고도에 끊는 전부래. 그래서 애는 코나랑 가서 봐 태가를 송셔봤다. 다 마음벌이야. 아니 지금 마음이 뒤절로 거니 제 때도 빼셔봐. 다 뒤뒤에 간다 이 변주주등 중뒤에 되게 쉐베이나 다 뒤에 섭게 통통해지게 변주주등 중뒤에 마시나 가고 싶어요. 아니 람 칼살을 하겠냐가 땡돼요. 저 뒤도 아자라 된데사. 저 뒤마시베 계절이. 다 뭐냐 자네다. 변도 거주 샤샤나. 아니 멀미 타숨. 저 말봐. 말벨라마 나로바. 나로가 날린데 개바쳐야 돼요. 다 되도 된다. 강다이 태가를 날린데 개바 멤버 있나요? 라마 공마 날린데 개바디디 숭셰의 슝디디 타네. 아니 로존나 냠시나 텐셔버 스타를 마도 수도 야마. 자들이 인도산에 표 강쟁기 나 추규기 날린데 변주주된 그 순간 시베이나 사가 건인신 쉬쉬 야쳐야 다 디디 디디 자를 샤는 마 텐데베 아니 담바 메다 조 상하고 타네 근데 그 담바 메다 유도다 디디 타네 아니 지금 주님마 다가 님을 사샤네 님마 까마 님마 더마 당나스니다 야 여문 고차야래 아니 더마를 사샤네 때든 자살을 서고 된데다 간다 뭔가 실수하는 것도 아니 거주를 사샤네 거주 지시 충제했습니다 뭔가 실수하는 것도 사자를 사샤네 상와 차숨스 뭔가 되는 것도 길로를 사샤네 왼서규보다 세규도 된데신다 뭔가 되는 것도 사실이 인도산에 디디야 소소스미 믹세기다 가서 그러면 거주를 송상의这个도 디디 자와야空都是的 나린데 변주 조정 강도 토용 거야. 저자와 네 시험할 수 그다 사진인데 아니 이제 순위시려서香港人排完那里呀，田个路就那里要特别是因为用这个的话，俺说各级原因，各级能下去呢，俺说职工各级原因，俺说职工各级原因是呢，职工各级小少级呢，职工是要求没有少了，职工各级什么呢？顶上呢，因为刚上各级要求没有少了，这是现在的吧？没得地的，马新呗，哎，鸟着所用的，先不是个代表呢，得干么啥样的？晓得吗？得这样子。근데 히말라야 리뷰는 그냥 그러시도가 나한테 그냥 넘긴도 좀 그래서 내 러버디 담바르도 좀도 그냥 좀 님십시야 딱제치야 딱제치가 그도 신뢰시야 주데 님은 같이 바빠라 샤시 배좀 망슬 로제 딱제치야 에 다이디 도시 대비해서는 내가 달라니 훨씬 일로 써도 돼
So on verse number 22, His Holiness says, "May I be blessed so that I may easily develop conviction in all the parts pertaining to the profound points of the perfection and Vajra vehicles by engaging in steady reflection and meditation on the meaning of the treatises of the great trailblazers." And so here, with regards to the trailblazers, we have masters like Nagarjuna and others, such as the 84 Mahasiddhas who have written, the Mahasiddhas of India, who have written Mahasiddhas of India, such as Saraha, who have written tantric texts. And particularly when it comes to Mahasiddhas, such as Saraha, they have written texts of Doha, called Doha, the spontaneous experiential songs, such as the 7 sets of Dohas and so forth. And so these teachings of the Tantra, of course, beginning with the teaching that the Buddha gave, and of course the Tantric teachings were not given popularly. And if it is the case that, as I said yesterday, the perfection of wisdom teachings, the Prajnaparamita Sutras, were not taught popularly by the Buddha, but they were taught to very few select disciples who have few pure karma. There's no need to mention that Tantra was taught by the Buddha to very few select disciples. And so there are many tantras that were given by the Buddha, and according to Master Aryadeva, actually, he makes these 3 categories of the teachings of the Buddha. First, the Buddha gave certain teachings by appearing as a monk, a celibate monk, to those, and then to those who have who are of inferior or called lower faculty, and then lower aspiration, and then he gave the extensive teachings of the Prajnaparamita Sutras to those who aspire to very extensive learning and path, and then he gave the secret mantrayana or tantrayana teachings to those who aspire to the very profound path. And so this is the distinction distinction that Master Aryadeva makes. And therefore the Buddha, when he gave the tantric teachings, of course he appeared in the form of different deities, appearing as the central deity of the mandala with all the mandala and the retinues and so forth. And when the Buddha actually appeared in those forms of deities and the mantra, they were not just, we should not think when it comes to thinking about visualizing mandalas and deities, we should not think that the Buddhas are always like that. I mean, just up there, solidly appearing as some deity, this and that deity. But actually what we should understand is that the Buddhas appear, these enlightened beings appear in the form of the Lord of the mandalas, with the mandala, to those who have very pure karma, and the practitioners who are spiritually matured enough to receive such visions and in which they receive tantric teachings. And so without being matured enough for such teachings, of course the Buddhas will not appear to the practitioners like in the form of those deities. And so one must understand that it is when a practitioner actually becomes qualified and matured enough to have this kind of vision of the deities, that the deities automatically appear to them. The Buddhas appear in the form of deities like that. And then they receive the teachings from these deities, and then by applying those teachings within them, the practitioners proceed along the path and then become enlightened. And having received the teachings themselves and practiced them, what happens is the practitioners practice and gain the experience, and then from their own experience they're able to pass on the same instructions to their own disciples. And when they give these instructions to disciples, they don't give it in public or popularly, but they give only to very few select disciples secretly. And so this is how we go about with the tantric practice, and therefore we can say that it is even after the death of the Buddha, the Shakyamuni Buddha, who appeared historically in the form of Siddhartha and became enlightened, even after his death, there is a possibility that he could still appear to certain matured practitioners in the form of Nirmanakaya, which actually ensues from Sambhogakaya, form of Buddha. And so here I have a story to tell. I know one Western nun who has done research on and comparing the teachings of the Theravada tradition, Pali tradition and Sanskrit tradition, and she's actually compiling a book. From her research, I'm writing a book. And one time she said she went to Thailand and she learned this story about a Thai Buddhist monk who became actually who was said to have who received a vision of the Buddha surrounded by his disciples, Arhat disciples. And when he after he had that vision, of course, according to his own tradition, the Theravada tradition that he follows in Thailand, the tradition says that the Buddha, once he passed away, there is nothing left of the Buddha, but then from his vision, of course, when he saw that the Buddha was still alive in the wisdom body, and he could confirm from his own experience, he rejected his own traditional view, and so and then. There was a disciple of this very Thai master who once also went to China, and when he bowed in front of a statue of Kuan Yin in China, then what happened was a light from the heart of the Kuan Yin statue actually shot down, and it actually touched his crown. And so with regard to this event, there was a picture and which I saw. And so in this way we can say that it is possible for people to have visions, and called in pure visions of deities and Buddhas and so forth. And so therefore I can say that the Mahasiddhas, the upholders of the Dharma, also could have the visions of Buddhas and deities and so forth. Through their practice. So Mahasiddhas such as Indra Bodhi, of course they followed the tantric paths and 4 sets of tantras. They have given teachings on the 4 sets of tantras, and particularly they have practiced the highest yoga tantra, and then the dohas which I was referring earlier come within the context of the highest yoga tantra teachings. And so here, according to the highest yoga tantra, we make distinction distinction between the subtle and gross states of mind. And so in the we all have the experience of gross states of mind, and then there is also the subtle mind, which is also called the clear light nature or the luminous mind. And so this, in fact, is what is being referred to in all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. And the Mahamudra of the Geryu, called the practice of Tantra, is done on this basis and of the luminous mind. And in the Sakya, when they talk about the three continuums, and they touch on this point, and in the Dzogchen practice of Adi Yoga also they touch on this point, and in the Gelug also they touch on this point of the luminous state of the mind, the subtle luminous mind. And so, with regards to this mind, it is this mind that is used in one's practice called to attain higher experiences of Tantra. And when you use this subtle mind, of course, the Mahasiddhas, when we talk about the Mahasiddhas, they already have the experience of emptiness. And on the basis of that understanding of emptiness, then they go into the higher practice of Tantra. And so with regard to the philosophical view, of course, in the Tantric text, we don't find a detailed explanation of it, but in Tantra, what we find detailed explanation of is the subjective mind, which is the clear light nature of the mind, that is used in meditation on emptiness. And so you have to understand that when you do Tantric practice, you have to base yourself on the general principles, the general principles and the paths that are already taught in the Sutrayana teachings. And then you can actually proceed from there into the higher Tantric practices. Otherwise, as it happened during the time of the Master Adisha, when he visited Tibet, that there were people who said they were practitioners of Vinaya, and then they despised Tantra, saying, oh, Tantra has no essence. And then there were others who proclaimed themselves to be tantric practitioners and despised Vinaya. So this is total. These show total ignorance about how they should be able to integrate both Tantra and Sutra, and. So one should have the complete knowledge about the whole range of the entire teaching of the Buddha, and see oneself in perspective, be able to see oneself in perspective, and then practice the Sutrayana, and then go into Tantric practice. And so when you are able to understand the entire process of how you develop from the lower experiences to the highest Tantric practice, then you will, of course, be able to have a very firm faith in the teaching of the Buddha, based on reason as well. So, and then I have another story to tell, which is that once when I was in a conference of Dharma teachers in some center in the West, there was a head of one of the Dharma centers who came to see me, and I had conversation with her, and she said, when you say that the teaching, all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions are have their source in Nalanda tradition, she told me that some people are not so happy about it because they think that they say that Kagyu and Nyingma teachings are not so much from Nalanda tradition as such. But as I said yesterday, and also when you check about these teachings. For example, in the Nyingma case, in the case of the Nyingma tradition, it came from Guru Rinpoche. Guru Rinpoche, of course, had his teachers who come from Nalanda traditions. We talk about the 8 Vidyadharas, and one of them is Nagarjuna, and Nagarjuna was from Nalanda, and so one of his gurus. And then in the Dzogchen practice also, you have the teachings of what is known as the nature of being primarily entirely pure and the essence being spontaneous and so forth. And of course, within the context of these teachings, you also have to have the understanding of emptiness. For example, in order to understand what Gadak or the primordial purity means, you have to have the understanding of emptiness. And then in the case of the Mahamudra practice, you also have to have the understanding of emptiness. It is indispensable because when we have within the Mahamudra, there is the ground level Mahamudra and the path level Mahamudra and so forth. And so the ground level Mahamudra refers to the understanding of the ultimate nature of things, that is emptiness. And so within the Nyingma teachings, there are, of course, teachings which were given by Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, to his disciples directly, and then there are other teachings which he actually asked to be concealed as dharmas, which would be later revealed. And so in order to understand the entire teaching of the Buddha, especially in order to understand the import of tantric teachings, how to go about with the practice, one must base oneself in the teachings of the 17 Nalanda masters. The understanding their writings is crucial to laying a very firm ground for understanding and going on with the tantric practice. And then in the case of the Kagyu practice, the Kagyu tradition, we have the Marpa Lotsawa, the great translator Marpa, who actually started the Kagyu tradition in Tibet. If you look at his teachers, his teacher was Naropa, and there were other teachers, and Naropa was from Nalanda, and Naropa's teacher was Tilopa. And then the
남자 도시 지가스 전에 배워봐는 막 기대지. 다 배워봐 나는데 그냥 캐버 첨부래도 봐. 그 나는데 주전에 내대 최종 남아 봐라. 지난도 공기다 shumsam셔 내한테 디난 도나죠. 야이 캠보 원색 아도 너도 공제기 단 제신디 나라. 아니 내대 최종 계시는 룸몽 shum창샤. 간다다 나는 이제 개발시부 차대요. 치수인데 야 가서 그 저걸 시고 쉬고래. 아니 나로는 진짜 저걸 심선에 아니 배워봐 신주셔지. 지나면 사제바 차잖아. 그 남자 간다 콩도서 나는 차도가.
And so you can say that all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions are, based on the teachings of the Nalanda masters. And so in the case of, for example, Sakya tradition, Sakya tradition has its source in Birwapa or Virupa. And Virupa was a great Mahasiddha who actually was also a great scholar from Nalanda monastery, a monastic institution. And so before he actually went on to become a tantric Mahasiddha or called tantric practitioner, he was in Nalanda and he was called Dharmapala at that time, a great scholar Dharmapala. And about him, with regard to him, I actually read that in one of the commentaries by the Korean scholar Wensek, who has a commentary on the Sutra, Samdhinimochana Sutra, Wensek quotes a lot from Dharmapala. And so he was a great scholar at that time. So Sakya tradition has its source in him, and so that also comes from the Nalanda tradition. And then in the case of the Nyingma tradition, within the Nyingma teachings, there are the teachings called Kama, which are the teachings that come from the Buddha Shakyamuni down, and then there are teachings which are called Dharma, the revealed treasure teachings of the Guru Padmasambhava, and then there are the teachings which are of pure visionary teachings. And in other words, with regard to that, the Sakya tradition, the Lamde, the path and fruit teachings also have its source in Virupa, Nalanda master. And then the Nyingma teachings of Karma, Dharma, and the pure visionary teachings there. And then in the within the Kagyu tradition, there are the four great and major and minor, 8 minor Kagyu traditions and orders. And then the Sakyas have the Sakya, Ngorpa, and Sarva traditions. And then within the Gelugpa also, there are certain called subdivisions. And so in this way, we have the different Tibetan lineages. But we must understand that all these traditions come from Nalanda tradition. And of course, there are some people who say in the West, who set up Dharma centers and say that they have set up a Kagyu center, and within the Kagyu center, Dikung and Drukpa Kagyu and so forth, and it's as if excluding one another. So I'm saying this to the Himalayan people. You should check this, what I have said, whether what I have said is right or wrong. And
so any the other Chajinang Disungi. Any Thailand the Uchi any Bali the Tengmengi be Chug Uchi race. Koran any Texing Chug Uchi is not Banzer Kaza Bazra Yana Gucci race. The Bekakar Stitch. That's what Koran take a moshi. Shambajik Devina nearly Bali Shunu Sung Sheve. 지금 소다게다 가서 그게 간다 겨우다 저중기변은 소다가 또 바디리체 아니 지금 대다 첩지 지금 창조 소등을 남냠는 제하다 디디 샤상시여체 다 디간이야 아니 동이 따와디 아니 지금 따와 차라 다 멍구 자체는 강사가 담에서도 마세베다 최지 담에 남샤디다 최지 담에래 먼저 여부터 그저제디 차상지다 심버시 아니 조조 담이게 따라 좋아지니 장주고 셈디 제 아니 친주고 냠려야디 덴데가 간에 디리 냠는 제인잖아요 발리기 흉내 송셰베 러지디디 마살샤 망실체 디간래야 아니 최이담에게 남샤다 아니 셈디다 아니 친주고 냠는 디디 쫀도는 시대야 되기 택신 바로 드시면 최고 되지. 대간이야. 아니 돈유도 별로 믹스해지다 계약의 채도 아니야. 남냠는 자지기. 아니 저런 틀이 나도냐. 선배. 다 어디에 냠는 자지. 대간네 제. 줘야 레마도 디디니 태고충 태고첨부 아니 상아 도지 태고선에 배 가가로 지야디 마시베다래. 근데 재미도 상대비 저유나리아 7년도 기저가 나도 되버 러가스 무슨 거야 7년도 냐면이 차상이었지 대간이야 나 상대비 냐면이 이거지 다 상대비 냐면 영어리야 아니 장주선도 돈이 다음에는 전 타비야 말이 사 도시에는 자네 그 땡도 찍을 강사 찍이 냐면 샤지 샤도 뭐다 좀 돼. 사단 나랑 좀 문구지기야 태보첨부사로 태고 충무사 셰체 쇼지 말합지디로 데 말다 데 배자는 날 빨리 슝기디 좀 된데가 아니 한다 망실이 차려 실상 디간이야 아니 파르도시베 태고권의 송셔디 내배점은 줄 알아 마도 배 가가 자니는 마다 디시행과시샤
एक जगह किसी एक सम्मेलन में मैं उस जगह के नाम नहीं सोचता हूँ इसलिए जो कि
So one time I was in some conference or some meeting, and one of the participants actually introduced me to some Thai master who was said to be the Sangaraja of Thai, and he said that this Sangaraja of Thai is actually the leader of the Hinayana tradition, and then he referred to me as the head leader of the Mahayana tradition, and then he referred to himself as the master of the Vajra so he referred to himself as a Mahayana leader, and then he referred to me as the Vajrayana teacher, and so a leader of the Vajrayana. So he was actually making three distinction between the three people, following three distinct kind of teachings of the Buddha, not understanding that these three teachings, what is taught in the Theravada tradition, the Pali tradition, and the Mahayana tradition, and particularly the within the Mahayana Vajrayana, are to be taken as a whole teaching, as called a complete teaching of the Buddha in a progression manner. And so we have to really understand that in the Pali teachings, they teach, what is taught is the Vinaya teaching, and then there is the teaching of selflessness as well. And so within the selflessness, when it comes to the Mahayana teachings, of course, we have the distinction between the selflessness of persons and phenomena, and then we also have the practice of the Bodhisattva, teaching on Bodhisattva, this altruistic and called aspiration to become a Buddha. And then within that practice of Bodhisattvas, you have the 6 perfections and so forth. And so we have to have the understanding that the Pali teachings are fundamental to the rest of the practices of Mahayana or Tantric teachings. And when once you have firm grounding in the 6 perfections and bodhicitta and understanding of emptiness or selflessness, then you can go into in order to have a very special mind or consciousness which understands emptiness in a very profound manner. Then you go into tantric practice using the very subtle state of mind, the subtle clear light mind, to have the to deepen your understanding or insight into emptiness. And so in this way, one has to understand that these teachings are have a progressive manner of that we should approach them in a progressive manner, even as an individual.
티신 점니 가서 점니 견주 총이 시작하면서 슝러 초를 와던 라버리 심벌 마셔 꾸는 시도 장 사디 뭐는 누구지 모르셔 자자가 내 남기도 쉬되기 나는 다 아주 별 강정의 종교 사극권이 전환도 잡아 뒤뒤에 배 찌기 배 너고 맞아서 대대야지 논주리 가다지 조심부지기 사면 슝도제 시 사마 냠신낭의 죄 조심 슝디시 다도선 담보 용조 내주 시험식 지리니 대고중앙도 제베 담바 아니 제가 별 강정을 좋아하는이야다 시 되게 이제 다 치료다 저부터 면자 제제 되지 내게团다 간다식 사격권이 서고 되게 찬도 면자 유에도 되지 차대도 되지 아주 시행과도 배 개심 버리 당아修신경이 쓰기다 나가게 신경이 나는 마시면 때는 또 신고를 못 해. 생각에 신고 말해. 냐면 이거면도 민두디네 다 중주도 신전이 연데 만에 지다 대바타나 드롭해야로 지다. 아니 찍을 마스터 찍을 살아야 돼. 야. 전다 찍고이네. 지금 그게 대세 견단다. 지금 되게 타네. 양고 난가 싸워셔야 돼. 쉬우지 편도도 와. 근데 시도산에 아니 오늘은 제 땜바터 주실람 처리셔봐서야 딘들이 수 고하잖아요. 자유도 저래셔. 사진에 인도 내가 신인 되어서 애니 변주 주든 기타 말람 자도 튜튜를 맞다. 애니 땜베 그도를 내야 너 러셔버디디 된다듯이 로리야 샤와 제제 애니 말람 겨로치 도신다. 다시는 흉무신다.
तो यहाँ आखिर में जो कि यहाँ अभी तक जो बताए गए थे वो सभी जो कि आपके समक्ष जो नियत के साथ मैंने ये बातें
And so what I've been saying so far is in order for you to have the complete understanding of the complete teaching of the Buddha, so you have a very holistic approach to the teaching of the Buddha. Otherwise, there are people who have, as we say, have very partial eyes, eyes which also only see partial things, impartially, and not see the holistically. And so, as Rinpoche has said, Tsongkhapa has said that, may I not be satisfied with only a very partial understanding or very gross understanding of the teachings of the masters of Nalanda, and we should also do the same and try to understand that what is taught in the Dzogchen teachings or the Sarma teachings, the new translation schools comprising Kagyu, Sakya, Gelug, and Jonang, and so forth. There are people who seem to take a very firm sort of position, saying, or they are Dzogchen paths or Nyingma Kagyu paths, and so forth, and as if thinking that these are totally unrelated traditions. That is not the case. That's a mistake. Actually, it is important to study each other's traditions, and so that one would really understand the benefit and the profundity of other traditions as well. And so, of course, once you understand the general thrust of all these different traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, you will also see the special features of each as well. And then you will understand that there is reason to be respectful of all other traditions as well. So of course, I'm not claiming that I know all these traditions well or anything like that, but when I read the teachings of all these different traditions, I feel genuine respect for all the teachings, all these teachings of the Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu, Gelug, and so forth. And therefore, I wish to tell you that you should also be able to make the point that it's you should not think that all these traditions are distinct from each other, unconnected. And please recite the praise of Nalanda masters sometimes and make your prayers as well.
Chöbadi mari deshi chögyugunga sejata chawuguna kubel chase des deshi namji deshi seji domno jugwani lungshin dodyune chöbadi chase somba tamjata da delaya deshi chögyugunga sejata chawuguna kubel chase des da delaya deshi senida 구시 등이 상제 다 아니 최주고 자다디 배지 다 조다 상제지 다 가시고 그게 로바도 멜로비 투줄을 예대베 최근조 아니 다 제대로 똑배 연다던 덴베 이니 세트 잡아서도 로베긴도 저 아니 상승 봐봐 나와지는다 긴두당스 대서도 마세베 아니 지금 냐랑 자주 봐 지금 다가는 신기 지금 냐랑 아니 지금 로와 다 봐봐 아니 대서도 마세베 다 소지 대서도 마세베 아니 지금 소지 담에베 지금 캠보다 로변다 아니 근데 다 자고 끊어 그거 차세대스 제티 소리 저다다 되게 야고도가 간담이 꾸러여 상물러리 하다 미 군두 능겨리 제르미 택신기 전죽성 냠리생의 지기 로종랑다 측견나라 강도 수단 조배에서等你 끌래 맨다신想了3바 타고에 초도 집을쇼 저는 송원은 신기 간다지 sem지 상부 냠수 내발라 나 얘기 캥대는 야고야 말이야. 근데 인도에서는 땅도 맨서 쓴 거야. 쉬우지 개심 그래도 와. 그래서 근데 인도 가시고를 보게 그것은 공도 쉬는 시리 아니 산계베 다음에 최신의 정도 마세베 지담인 점물이 되간게 뭐는 지기다 교매 지심 전부 여다봐 지름이 삼디 중에 근데 다 추규면라는 게 다 간담이 겨초 대주제 참원올이야 지금은 그것이 하시는데 근두시 하셔야지 왜버지르셔 저상가 나도 저 소수 대바지 셔서다 냠내지야데 소수미 상제비 취도 지기어리디 어다지 견주망볼이야 판도 난겐기 애니 취규 리스마 체베 이미 다 최시 우치티 잡아서리야 근두시가데 개심버리 nga chashana nga sanjishimde nege jenjari beji dos dayari bendu chubding shungzi dos dayari eni tawzhu menzawa dhizu chaydi chiga daya thane kanda sanjebe shungni darshi chaybe shidi thane ma dayundu kanda peke gemdu yudabaji tonguredi yine simja mongul pengido wa kamdo mewa thade simja mongul pengido wa 저도 진짜 인도산에 먼저 전에 그 근도 외버려. 아니 이슈 나가. 지 힌두 나가. 지 가제 나가. 육 나가. 지들 레벨 거 먼저 전에 다 취규 뒤ቷ네 미마물을 팽겨야래. 지 대외 로동자들이 판도 쳐야래. 미사야 먹을 판도 쳐야래. 다다 이내 미사야 먹을 판도 지겨야래. 마음만에 이내 판도 연구를 해서 제제. 제시도 그것이제 또 세대. 와. 저 딩안서 취규 tum부고야 되는 개침물이 tum부 영향을 싸워도 그것에는 tum부 연구래. 지기지기배 샤샤한데서 대위는 tum부 연구하는. 이 개침물이죠. 차우구나 그걸 찬세됐어.
And so we are now going to go through the text itself, the guide to the Bodhisattva way of life. The first regarding the first 4 lines, the Sugata here refers to the Buddhas, the enlightened beings, and then it says the Buddhas are endowed with the Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya here, of course, refers to the Buddha's attainment of Nirvana and his wisdom, Dharmakaya. And then, or in other words, it also indicates the Dharma jewel. And then you also have in this homage as well as their noble children. And so noble children particularly refers to the Bodhisattva, Arya Bodhisattvas, and then of course we can also include those worthy of veneration, including the masters or the practitioners of the Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddhayana, Shravakayana, Pratyeka Buddhayana, those who have become arahats, as well as those who are Arya beings, and those who are not Arya beings but on the path of accumulation, preparation, and so forth, and also those worthy of veneration includes our own masters and upadhyayas who have given us vows and so forth. And so these 4 lines are paying homage to all these people, beginning with Buddha down to those who are worthy of veneration. And so as practitioners of bodhicitta, or Mahayana path, we should, as it is said in the 8 verses of the mind training by Langri Thangpa, may I be, whenever I accompany others, may I see myself as the lowest of all. And so this is very important, an attitude to have, not to have arrogance, because it's no use. It's not good to be arrogant amongst people and others. And so it's always good to hold yourself lowly. And then if you look in the world and respect others, respecting others is very important. If you look in the world, of course, we should not only respect the Buddhist practitioners of Buddhism only, but also there are people from other religious traditions, and there are other people also, spiritual people, who are able to help so many people in a great many ways. And therefore, the founders of those religious traditions and then the leaders of these religious traditions, we need to show respect to them as well. This is very important. And so as far as I'm concerned, of course, I have studied, I'm a Buddhist, and I've studied the great text written by the 17 Nalanda masters, and I have great faith in my own tradition and these masters and so forth. But I also respect all the different traditions, the religious traditions such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and so forth, because these religions and the religious leaders are been able to help the millions and millions of people in the past, and they are still doing the same now, and they will be able to do help and benefit millions and millions of people in the future as well. And therefore, there is sufficient reason for us to pay respect to all the religious traditions, religious leaders who are dedicated to the well-being of others. And therefore, I also visit the different temples and churches of all these traditions. And being sectarian is no use at all for us in the world. It's very important to have to practice harmony amongst religions.
and the summer kundu shushu summer cuban dollar pension but dumba deshi gyoda cha cha de sene other de deshi de da and that's the summer cubas dollar pension ba dumba deshi gyo sa da di one deshi gyondu shushu wada da the deshi sa de ya bangba deshi doba deshi sino da de je de kang de 20年前到大同内要要的是吧다 쉽게 쇼하스케면도 뭐가지 다 대시 세기 dom론 주관이 롱신 도주는 죄버자 아스네 대화시베다 장주서번 남기 아니 그게 토마전셔도 다도 심계의 디베시다 디안의 심계의 준주기 송야디 심계의 민념바 다바 공도 배야가 제도 숨셔버지 배지처리하리. 자, 드니 인도자네 다데 드니르베다 장주서도 심게네 다 지금 잡아로 놓수 되는 아니 다봐 숨해야지. 다 친루기 잡아디 개세기 다 냠네 타다 뒤셔 차되기하리. 드니 인도는 dom도 차되기하리. 디시세기 dom로 주관이 아니 롱신 사데 쿵메바 맨스 아니 좀 된데 니기 아니 거루 시숭이 어느 좀 된데 숭 차르지 엔데 짠두치기 하려서나 짠두치는 거 봐야 말로잖아 데베니 바 메스 도르드네니 저 도르드네니스 쿵도 잡이 룽고 쿵유 이네 야 룽다 깨버져 여기 있는 사람들 빼나 높여버지도 차잖아 다 개부시 차되게 하래. 얘네도 지금 장사도 차셔는 얘네도 뒤에 저기 하래. 아니 러브드랑 차셔네. 다 개부요 하래. 다 안데 뒤에 레주다 손도 뒤에 지다 숨겨 인도 도드는 저버차스. 다들이 캥중에 치. 먼저 좀 차진의 캥중벌이. 차진의 거는 그냥 담아쳐 버려도 와. 먼저 뭐좀 드주메스. 디지 개방 대저 개방 달라 유명인데스 디지 현주 상방 달라 메스 송샤 디기 뭐인데 누기 다 가서 저거 참만남지기 이가다 좀바탐지기도 소원은 시지 겨우패시 패러시 싫어 전에는 대셔는 돈도민이 코나마도 차도 좀 어떻게 강야 용준되는 시안의 패바시 달라 상방 메신 소원은 신기 뭐인데 누기 견대네 랑들로 되게 거봐. 랑로 되게 거봐. 슈데 아니 뒤제다 가서 nenden기니 연된데니 아니 샹라 다 가서 되게 거봐. 때 딱딱 누구도 같아. 다데 두저 컨디션에서나 단지 룸냐 소리 좀 이나 어다 룸데 가면 거용선 이 계시라서 돈하기 지금 말봐 자상가 말한 저지 준주 셰롱 가면 톱뇨 셴네 따고 자신 소리를 집이나 그렇게 믿어 다 진짜 인도 먼저 뭐좀 들주면서 다 들으자는 판다 용 말이지 다디 슈다 연대 거리에서나 디 신규 권의 권도 최상 동야지 디고 양의 양도 공국이야 양의 양도 집을 제국이야 진짜 인도 양의 양도 상국이야 진짜 인도 다디 사직 퇴네 다 준주 사 롱탑 셰롱탑이었으니 샤샤 말이지 양의 양도 퇴고 버리지人지구를 사샤네 소소人을 사샤네 사직로 안에 이는 바샤샤시 말이지 배지 규율을 있어 시원해如果너무 열다 사서 샤샤 멤버체 어다 시원해 송시버디 양의 양도 돼 양의 양도 돼 애는 섬리야 지금 소도서야지 고요 그래서 섬로 소도 차야 생긴디 kumji tane samlo soda ro bana lagze jibe ine ko lulu temba ready ine ko kombu to ba sa ko magomna ene lulu tembe lagze jibe ine ko chata koda시 대고 to so ko komna ene bana num동에서 스페이스 동에서 샤샤나 num동에서 샤샤나 ko kom이 왜 인도산에 대부 쉬울 시시도 자 되는 인도 내가 이제 좀 세세되게 그 정도는 넘는 집에 그들이 아니 이게 꼭በት 사발에 이게 농동에 있을 때 야 담다가 쇼스도 아침 때문에 대체 어다 대장도 여기서 쉬시도 나를 지나는 샤체 뒷담이나 어다 수지 먹고 쉬시도가 라고 장 먹으시도 왔다 라고 장 먹어서 라고 장 이제 농주하고 걸어서 이게 세게 되셔야 되게 딱 뒤로 건보를 먹어도 왜다 그다음에 든자하고 로존제 엔디디베 일베 차상베 가서 우리 거기 집을 쟁. 다 하는베 미시다 말해봐. 인도도도 탑신 저리도. 그 룰 때문에 연대진에 공고도. 매밀로 영어에 공고로. 그래서 다가는 신기 담이도 왜 싫어서 직접. 아니 랑집을 좀 진지사디디 통화번호 가서 검대하러. 딱 검지 쉬우지 여행에디 다 소도 소도잖아요. 디 독초디도 kum지 쉬우지 때는 마도 다 예배 차디디 처럼 뭐 검사로 통화번호 검대하다. 다디 년부터 다들 미지 디잖아. 땅에서 검받인 거로. 엔 사식 상담이야. 근데 켜는 매 봐. 된자식 상담이 땅에 떠고 지면서 럽혀 매 봐. 단 된자제 나와제 로제니 애니 상담이 다 로주라 된 상담이 있나 갈래야 애니고 안도부터 통원의 검대별로 디디 애니 준비기 지 뽑아펴를 샤제 코드디 콩 맞춰서 서로 샤놔야지 남주지 그 상담이 있나 애니 콩 란진진 슉슉 슉슉도디 준주고 리포트 당연히 란진지 카자면 차용도 나가는 신기 등진 다음에 추기 지금 우면 슝거 리포트디 지금 우세 생기지는 뉴스에 전에 상무 스타브 있나 아니 등진 카자면 쳐도 다시 리베 gem밤 좋은 점 뭐인 봐. 딱 콜로리아 공고로. 그래서 인도 차직 퇴니 샤샤시 말이스. 차직 로샤 샤샤시 말이스. 양의 양도 네 양의 양도 때 저래서 드리다. 다디네 대비서 개방을 달을 유명돼 있어야 돼. 다야 링가시 다 된다는 사실이 뒤치는 뭐 쉬우시도 없잖아요. 지 제시 책이야. 지금 당도 지금 해야 돼. 저저 믹스에 사업면이야. 책도 뭐 쉬우시도 없잖아요. 책도 참 지금 거로. 다디 그 말하자도 дү시스잖아요. 책을 믿는 되는데 제 송도가 강사를 믿는 철을 대안에 책을 믿는 되는데 대안에 장들을 믿는 예전을 대안 남시를 믿는 이시를 던서 땜바시스 송도가. 그래서 드리면 인도산에 다디 책상기 년부지 계속해 말아. 다 된다 상당으로. 된다 야고여는 책 년부게면에 따라. 된다 저면은 책 년부인에 접습니다. So the Hindu zane, there's a cabin that 6 on the shower in a depend on mess. That sigla meduba, sigla medumber, turn the damage in a depend on Yunguru. So the Hindu, there's a cabin that the Yemindi, Dindiji that has all big young things in a depend on Yumaris, in a basic depend on Yumaris. The Hindu Shana Pingle Sabaki Rochaboke may so. And a cover Rangi Yilla, Comshin Nendi Sums. That disham de Gawa Comshin, Target Tabeshu, Dida King, Rishi Pegula, Tata Gawanya by Shanji Jang, she didn't know to use. Diana Tony Chen, children Namji Shiru, lost Sur never on the Samutong and Jiggy, Chumaina, and Shandale Pepper Yunguris. What this one?
So in verse number 1b, first of all, in the verse number 1a, the Sugata, the term Sugata is mentioned. So Sugata refers to the Buddhas. And so with regard to this term, of course, there are many ways of interpreting, understanding it, and there are great explanations of this word. According to the Brahmana Vartika of Dhammakirti, of course, he has called explained the term Sugata, which is mentioned, in fact, in Dignaka's Brahmana Samuchaya, where Dignaka, in his verse of salutation, refers to, pays homage to the Buddha for being an authoritative person, as well as someone who is totally dedicated for the well-being of others, altruistic person. And then he also refers to the Buddha with the term the teacher, and then Sugata. So Sugata here, according to Dhammakirti, is understood as referring to the realizations of the Buddha, as well as the fact that he has overcome all the negativities that are in our mind, that were in his mind stream. And so you should learn about the meaning of Sugata from Brahmana Vartika and study that text for more detailed explanation. And then here in the text, the verse 1b says, "Here I shall explain how to engage in the vows of the Buddha's children, the meaning of which I have condensed in accordance with the scriptures." So what Master Shantideva is saying is that, of course, this text is meant for those who wish to cultivate Buddha, for the purpose of cultivation of bodhicitta, and then not causing it to decline, but to advance it further, enhance it further and further. And so he's showing us how to engage in the Bodhisattva path and practices. And so the Bodhisattva practices refer particularly mainly to the 6 perfections of morality and so forth, and therefore and then he says that in verse number 2, he says there's nothing. There's nothing that is here. And with regard to the teaching called the meaning I will have, which I have condensed in accordance with the scriptures. So what he's saying is that by the phrase "in accordance with the scriptures," he's saying that he is not writing this book, from his own at his own will, like whatever he thinks is right or anything like that. But he's actually has his source in the teachings of the Buddha himself. And so the term condensed here refers to the fact that he is actually condensing the meaning of the vast scriptures, such as for example, in the case of the Bodhisattva practices, there is the Dharamsala Sutra, which was taught by the Buddha, and then as a condensed meaning a condensation of that sutra, there is the Bodhisattva Bhumi written by Asanga. So here, the Master Shantideva is saying that he is also giving a very condensed meaning of all these scriptures. Then with regard to the verse number 2, of course, when he says that there's nothing here that has not been explained before, and I have no skill in the rhetoric, in the art of rhetoric, what he's actually doing is he's showing humility. And so the reason why he's doing it is, that he says that there's nothing that he has to teach something new, that is new, and he has no called art of composition as well. And what these show is that if there are people who actually are interested in the beauty of the text with poetical, rhetorics and being very poetical and all this, then this is not a text that he is writing for such people. And then he's not also giving this teaching or writing this book for those who are arrogant, and therefore in this way he is saying that he is actually writing this text for himself to acquaint in his mind about the practice of the Bodhisattvas. And so he says, explicitly, of course, he says that he is not, he has no intention to benefit others, but to help himself. But implicitly, what he's actually saying is that he actually this text is not meant for those who look for beauty of the language, poetry, or anything like that. But this text is meant for those who are actually who aspire to cultivate altruism within themselves. And so, this text is not meant for, not like something like telling a story to somebody or going through some history book. Because once you have read these story books or history books, that's it. You don't need to incorporate those teachings into yourself or anything like that for the transformation of mind as such. But this teaching is meant for those who wish to make transformation within themselves, discipline their mind, and then progress along the path. And therefore, you need to listen to the teaching or read the book over and over again in order to familiarize your mind with the meaning of what Master Shantideva himself is teaching. And therefore, even when it is the case for physical skills, you need to put lots of effort to familiarize, and then you become adept at doing things. It is there's for example, in the case of the astronauts or those who fly aeroplanes and so forth. Of course, I sometimes get to go into the cockpit of aeroplanes, and I see so many different switches and buttons. And if I were to fly in an aeroplane, it would be a disaster. I would be causing a disaster. So you need to familiarize those things, and then you become adept. And without looking at the machines or switches, you actually are able to do them. So similarly, it is the case with the practice of Dharma, that you need to familiarize yourself.
Buddhism gajamin, Dharamsala gajamin, Sanghamsala gajamin sa di jang sa je de shebe di ma so ta ko Monggu ji sam dang wa zhe ba da ge wang ga and the bidil shi bi ma din 로즈 그래서 가샤가 집에 그들이야 로자라마 법체 안다 대한테 계속 좋은 저거대 대 있는 거서 장주 유버즈 이제 차다 발림지 키용체 안가도 대 투체 당한 상황도 장다 상황도 들어왔어 유버즈 남거를 봤어 인체 안은 낭배치도 근저지래지 안은 부द्ध미션은 거자면 남음션은 거자 상고선은 거자면서 낭배치래서 원은 부द्ध스 가르치 신경해서 다 제가 드리도 산제쇼 긴둘 교수쇼 식성시 때문에 연구야 말해. 다 산제쇼 긴두사데 그렇게 뭐지 시에가지 다한테 내가 뭐 교사데. 사실은 인두산에 간다연이 로종체니 시행과지를 샤마도 대화지고 그 지금도 와. 사실은 인두 쇼도 남지기 싫어. 아주 밀리아 이해되었다. 디 타네 아니 samtangwa shuji cha yin zane ene milu toba mengen jin bina milu toba mena ene nabe chötün jig samtang de sha khawre sta de shi ga dinde yin zane dinde de beta milu gu nane ene tawa ge jobo chu chene da 대전 주수 상에 다 류딘디 ene chö be sanjebe chö be cha 상어지다 나버 타고 싶도 그래 어디 숨겨요? 다들이야, 아니 대화제 사디 미kum바제 차회샤네 대화. 조버 주스하디 튕긴 댐베차네 조버 주스. 다 도스니 송되게 하래. 당가란 줄들이 폐쇄들이 폐쇄 대전 주주 지금 다 가다 뭐도 지도부 상대게지 차디도. 그래서 인도 대대보다 류된디 당가란 점물이 가리야 미통주 dunju langsida yare da dinane 대전 조주 상황에서 있는 시우nyungda 시간nyungre 사들이 인도 드네게 타네다 가당야라 단조 무슨네 다 더스기다 쉬어도 남지기 쉬어고 빼던데 봐 애니 지난게 괜찮 드네지기다 급대 당문에라 지 거쳐버 지사버지 대화토버 텐데 버지 삼버지 로지 레야지 다 대화토버 텐데 버지 알라 무서야지고 말해 무서야 저번에 강게 미통주 dun주 하스티 상물로 무서야 배지 되게 하래 진짜 기버스 얘기해요 하면 그래 자 다들 인도다 대전 주주 참여 류전 탑 되겠지 지름없이 가서 집어넣는 지금 미 상물로 지금 생그 연대로 당도 적으로 쓰는 쉬셔야 돼. 다 제다도 대 나무 산재에 최바 지금 거는 샤베 대전 주주 참여 류전 탑 지금 거는 샤베 이는 다 출도 남지기 싫어부터 하네. 다 가다 상담과 돼. 시우지다 개셔부제니 대화도 전화도 자꾸 그래서 단종은 손에다 치유를 로중신의 취차 거버 타지. 내내 단조 단셔왔었네. 어다디 단조를 리딘디 내가 원도 줘야 이네 땡디 땡네 주소 마상에 봐. 대 또던데 봐. 지금 사토리스. 다 가다 원도 리딘 토야디 선능을 내서 토고요리. 선능을 내겠다. 디네 가다 미기주 빵배 기주 수dum라 럼나 에는 선능을 내 사용 그래. 그래서 디터를 에니 지금 샹라 지금 진보동도 지금 되게 간다 지금 팬들로 그것도 주어이나 선는 거래 사용 거야. 근데 인디 뭔도 주비하게 주소 똑똑한데 맞지? 아주 류딘 디 주토고야. 내리 주야 이네 류딘 디 주토고야. 탐제 전벽 고방 주야 이네 전불링버 내기 감중된 디 아니 저 산지지 고방에 지기 된대기 차진지 예발이 된대기 뭐 인도산에 단조 단샤와 삼발이 단조 단샤와 삼네 최차 누버 타제 그래서 내고도 더두근 되도 주야기 태보시 좀 마드 제베 아니 취주디디 냥술내 누버 타제 다 단조 네버 가와상 걔들 펜버 모두는 친디 양다 줘봐 가는 줄을 써야 친에 단조 토바 네가와래 가르스도나 단조 대화던 저배 최 dindi지 여등에디 야 단조 최 리네 유소 러베고네 단조 가서 우리 그게 연대들이 상치고를 마도 나는 geb지고 용거 말이. 자 근데 이번 인도산에 다당하는지 지 고순기 지 류기 지다 조조 삼루래. 삼루자 지 섬주 하람 녀몽 거라 지 당도라는 소리지. 녀몽도 뭐지 걸리네. 녀몽 곰집에 파사로 커야 왕기지도 지 미기외 류가가 접어도 미기외 초코라 다 아니야 소리지 또가. 그래서 인들 쉽게 배송야들이 가사대 다가다 왜 담보만이 처용지 소원만신 다 겨우 배제디 담보만이 비춰 증기가 됐어. 인들 간다지게 밀루상부 토토야 가고를 했어. 배수 마셔나 치드니는 배수 마셔나 랑가를 나람 집어 지고기 밀루상부 토토야 가고를 했어. 인들산에다 단적은 밀루 톱가 니가 삼배 타네 천들 다 전지지 두고 다 제고 그랬어. 어디 되게 단소 삼들이.
जैसे कि इसमें कहा गया है पहला प्रवचन में कि बार बार हमें इस पर ध्यान देते करना जरूरी है और जैसे आचार्य ने यह कहा है कि मेरे लिखावट में भी ऐसा कुछ खास नहीं है तो जैसे कि कभी हम शब्द पर ही ध्यान देते हैं
with regard to Buddhism, of course, we need to do much critical analysis and contemplation of the teachings in order to practice it. And once when I was going to Jispa in Keelong region, on the way, after crossing the Ratangla pass, I reached a village, a small village, where I met with some Buddhists, and there they offered me lunch and tea and so forth. And after that, then I met them in a group, and I asked them who is a Buddhist, and they said someone who says Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, and Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. And then I asked them what is a Buddha, who is a Buddha, and they said they didn't know. And so it's not enough for Buddhists just being able to say, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but you must actually understand what the teaching is about. And so what we have to understand is the meaning of the teaching of the Buddha himself. And so at this time, we have, of course, found a human life where we have the access to the teaching of the Buddha. And we have if you look at the over 7 billion human beings on this earth, of course, it is very few who actually have a complete condition for the practicing the Dharma and sincerely. And even looking at we talk about the leisure and endowments, and 8 leisures and 10 endowments. And so these are favorable conditions for practicing the Buddha. So in order to be able to do such practice, one must have this kind of human life. And so, having found a life where we have the 8 leisures and 10 endowments, we must determine to make this life a meaningful one. And so, therefore, Shantideva is saying here, leisure and endowments are very hard to find, and since they accomplish what is meaningful for humanity, if I do not take advantage of them, how will such a perfect opportunity come about again? And so, when we talk about making this life a meaningful one, it's not just about making money and having a good life in this life alone, but actually being able to integrate the teachings of the Buddha himself within our mind so that we can actually make this life a meaningful one in the sense that we can actually be of help to oneself as well as other sentient beings. And so and therefore, particularly, we can talk about all the people on this earth to make their life meaningful, and in general, and particularly for the practitioners of Buddhism. And therefore, what we need to understand is to recognize this kind of human life that we have found, and be with that recognition, and you should think of practicing the Dharma. And then also you should think that this life is very meaningful, and in the sense that you by understanding the meaningfulness of this life, you should significance of this life, you should actually practice avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions and cultivating the 10 virtuous actions. And through these 10 virtuous actions, what you will create is the meritorious karma. So once you create meritorious karma, then what it will help is to have a higher rebirth with the full complete conditions for practicing the Dharma in the next life as well. And therefore you should also think of helping other sentient beings as well, not only oneself but helping other sentient beings as well. And in this life that we have found is significant in the sense that in this life we can create the causes for a higher rebirth in the next life, and also we can create the causes for becoming reaching nirvana or Buddhahood finally. And therefore, with this understanding of the significance of this life, we have to make the decision or come to the conclusion that there is that you have the potential to practice the Dharma in this life. And then if you look at the different causes and conditions that bring about such a human life with leisure and endowments, of course each and every cause has been very cultivated or gained or created with great difficulty, and therefore one should find that it is important to create the causes, very strong causes and conditions for such a human life in the future. And if you look at this life of ours, we are more or less kind of carried away by negative states of mind and actions and so forth. And so we have to try to go against that current and create the positive, greater and stronger positive and meritorious actions.